The morning sun cast long shadows across the palace grounds as Prince William adjusted his tie for the third time. His hands trembled slightly, something that hadn't happened since his wedding day years ago. Beside him, Catherine smoothed down her navy dress, her usually composed demeanor showing cracks of vulnerability that only her husband could recognize. They had received the call 3 days earlier. The voice on the other end belonged to Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the royal physician who had been caring for Queen Elizabeth during her recent health struggles. The words echoed in William's mind like a haunting melody he couldn't shake. "Your Majesty, I believe it's time for the family to gather." The drive to Balmoral Castle felt endless. Catherine reached across the car's leather interior and grasped William's hand. Neither spoke. But their intertwined fingers told a story of shared fear and mutual support. Through the tinted windows, they watched the Scottish countryside blur past, each mile bringing them closer to a reality they weren't prepared to face. William's thoughts drifted to his childhood memories of Balmoral. The castle had always been his grandmother's sanctuary, a place where the formality of royal life softened into something more human. He remembered fishing expeditions with his grandfather Philip, afternoon teas where the Queen would actually laugh at his terrible jokes, and quiet moments when she would share stories about her own childhood. Catherine squeezed his hand tighter as they approached the castle gates. She had grown to love the Queen deeply over the years, initially intimidated by the monarch's presence, but eventually discovering the warm, witty woman beneath the crown. The Queen had become not just her sovereign, but a grandmother figure who offered guidance during the most challenging moments of royal life. The castle staff moved with unusual solemnity as the couple arrived. Margaret, the head housekeeper who had served the royal family for over 30 years, greeted them with red-rimmed eyes. Her voice barely above a whisper, she informed them that other family members were already present, and that Her Majesty was resting comfortably in her private chambers. As they walked through the familiar corridors, past portraits of generations of royals who had called this place home, William felt the weight of history pressing down upon him. These halls held centuries of joy and sorrow, celebration and mourning. Now they were about to witness another chapter in the long story of the House of Windsor. Catherine noticed how William's breathing had become shallow and irregular. She had seen him through many difficult moments, from the death of his grandfather to public scandals that rocked the royal family. But this was different. This touched the very core of who he was, threatening to uproot the one constant presence in his life since childhood. They paused outside a sitting room where hushed voices could be heard. Through the partially open door, they glimpsed King Charles speaking quietly with Princess Anne, their faces etched with concern and exhaustion. The scene struck Catherine as surreal. These powerful figures who commanded respect from millions around the world, reduced to anxious family members grappling with an inevitable loss. Dr. Mitchell appeared in the hallway, her medical bag in hand, and her expression carefully neutral. She had served the royal family for over 15 years, maintaining the delicate balance between professional detachment and personal care that such a position required. Her presence had become both reassuring and ominous in recent weeks. "How is she?" William asked, his voice barely audible. The question hung in the air like incense, heavy with meaning and dread. The doctor's pause spoke volumes before her words confirmed their fears. "She's peaceful," Dr. Mitchell replied, choosing her words carefully. "She's been asking for the family. She wants to see everyone while she still can." Catherine felt her knees weaken at the implication. Throughout her years as a royal, she had learned to maintain composure in even the most challenging situations, but this moment tested every lesson in self-control she had ever learned. The reality of losing the Queen, a woman who had been the pillar of strength for the entire family, seemed impossible to accept. William leaned against the stone wall, his usual princely posture abandoned in favor of human vulnerability. Memories flooded through him, his grandmother's steady presence during his parents' tumultuous marriage and eventual divorce, her unwavering support when he struggled with the pressures of royal duty, and her quiet joy when he found happiness with Catherine. The sound of footsteps echoed down the corridor as more family members arrived. Each face told the same story of barely contained emotion and desperate hope mixed with inevitable acceptance. The castle, usually filled with the business of royal life, had transformed into a space where time seemed suspended, where every moment carried the weight of potential finality. Catherine watched her husband struggle with emotions he rarely allowed himself to express publicly. As future king, William had been trained from birth to put duty before personal feelings, to be the rock upon which others could lean. But in this moment, faced with losing the woman who had been his anchor throughout life's storms, even his considerable strength showed signs of cracking. The afternoon light streaming through the castle's ancient windows began to dim as evening approached. Somewhere in those private chambers, a remarkable woman who had dedicated 70 years of her life to serving her country was preparing for her final act of grace, saying goodbye to the family she loved more than any crown or title could ever represent. As they prepared to enter her presence, both William and Catherine knew that whatever awaited them behind that door would change their lives forever. The weight of future responsibilities, the grief of impending loss, and the precious opportunity for final moments together created an emotional storm that threatened to overwhelm them both. The heavy oak door stood before them like a gateway between two worlds. Behind it lay conversations they had dreaded having, moments they wished could be postponed forever, and the woman who had shaped their understanding of duty, service, and love. William's hand hovered over the brass doorknob for what felt like an eternity before Catherine's gentle touch on his shoulder reminded him that they would face this together, as they had everything else. The Queen's private sitting room had been transformed into something resembling a peaceful sanctuary. Soft lighting replaced the usual bright overhead fixtures, and the medical equipment had been discreetly arranged to intrude as little as possible on the intimate atmosphere. Fresh flowers from the castle gardens filled crystal vases, their fragrance mixing with the familiar scent of the Queen's favorite Earl Grey tea. Elizabeth sat in her favorite armchair, the one she had occupied for countless family gatherings and state meetings over the decades. Despite her frailty, she maintained the posture that had become synonymous with royal dignity. Her eyes, though tired, still held the sharp intelligence and warmth that had guided her through 7 decades of unprecedented change in the world. "My dear ones," she said, her voice softer than usual, but carrying the same affectionate tone they had known their entire married life. "Come, sit with me." William approached first, kneeling beside her chair in a gesture that spoke of both royal protocol and genuine affection. Catherine followed, taking the Queen's free hand in both of hers. The three of them formed a small circle of connection in the vast room, the weight of unspoken words settling around them like a comfortable blanket. The Queen's eyes moved between her grandson and his wife, taking in details that only someone who had watched them grow and change over the years would notice. She saw the way William's jaw tightened when he was trying not to cry, a habit he had developed as a young boy. She noticed how Catherine's thumb moved in small circles on the back of her hand, an unconscious gesture of comfort and care. "I need to tell you both something," the Queen began, her voice carrying the authority that had commanded respect from world leaders while maintaining the gentleness of a beloved grandmother. "These past weeks, lying here with time to think, I've realized how proud I am of what you've become together." William felt his carefully constructed emotional barriers begin to crumble. Throughout his life, his grandmother's approval had meant more to him than any public accolade or official recognition. Her words carried the weight of a lifetime of service, sacrifice, and unwavering dedication to the crown and country. Catherine squeezed the Queen's hand, remembering the early days of her relationship with William, when she had felt overwhelmed by the expectations and traditions of royal life. It was the Queen who had taken her aside during a particularly difficult period and shared her own struggles as a young woman thrust into unexpected responsibility. "You taught us what it means to serve," Catherine said, her voice thick with emotion. "Not just the country, but each other and our family. You showed us that duty and love don't have to be separate things." The Queen smiled, an expression that transformed her face from the formal mask the public knew to the warm, loving woman her family cherished. She had spent decades balancing the demands of monarchy with the needs of her family, often feeling that she had failed at both. But looking at William and Catherine, seeing the strength of their partnership and their dedication to their role, she knew that something good had come from her choices. William struggled to find words that could capture what his grandmother meant to him. She had been the constant in his life when everything else seemed chaotic. When his parents' marriage fell apart, when his mother died, when he struggled with the weight of his future responsibilities, she had been there with quiet wisdom and unwavering support. "I don't know how to do this without you," he finally managed to say, the admission costing him greatly. As a future king, he had been taught never to show weakness, but in this moment, vulnerability felt more honest than strength. The Queen reached up and touched his face with a trembling hand. "You already know how," she said firmly. "You and Catherine have found something that took me many years to understand. You've learned to lead with your hearts as well as your heads. The monarchy will be stronger because of that." Hours passed as they talked, sharing memories that spanned decades. The Queen told stories about William's grandfather that he had never heard, painting pictures of a young man struggling with his own unexpected path to the throne. She shared her fears and doubts from the early years of her reign, admitting to moments when she wondered if she was strong enough for the role history had thrust upon her. Catherine listened intently as the Queen described the loneliness that came with the crown, the weight of making decisions that affected millions of lives, and the constant balance between personal desires and public duty. These insights into the human side of monarchy helped her understand not just the Queen, but also the challenges that lay ahead for her and William. As the evening wore on, other family members joined them. King Charles entered quietly, his face showing the strain of watching his mother's decline. Princess Anne followed, bringing with her the no-nonsense practicality that had always been her trademark, but couldn't quite hide her emotional struggle. The conversation shifted and flowed around shared memories and family stories. They talked about holidays at Balmoral, state occasions that had gone wrong in amusing ways, and the small moments that had bonded them together as more than just a royal family, but as people who genuinely cared for each other. The Queen seemed to gain energy from having her family around her. Her eyes brightened as they reminisced about William and Catherine's wedding day, remembering the joy she had felt watching her grandson find such happiness. She spoke about her hopes for their children and her confidence that the next generation of royals would continue the family's tradition of service while adapting to a changing world. As the night deepened, exhaustion began to show on the Queen's face. The effort of staying alert and engaged for so many hours was taking its toll, but she seemed reluctant to let the moment end. These final conversations with her family were precious beyond measure, worth any physical discomfort they might cause. Dr. Mitchell appeared periodically to check on her patient, each visit a subtle reminder of the medical reality underlying this emotional gathering. The Queen accepted the interruptions with grace, but her eyes always returned quickly to her family, as if she was trying to memorize every detail of their faces. William and Catherine found themselves clinging to every word, every gesture, every moment of connection. They knew that these hours represented the end of an era, not just for the monarchy, but for their personal relationship with a woman who had shaped their understanding of love, duty, and the delicate balance between private happiness and public service. The morning light filtered through the ancient windows of Balmoral Castle with unusual gentleness, as if nature itself understood the gravity of the moment. William had barely slept, spending most of the night in the chair beside his grandmother's bed, watching the steady rise and fall of her breathing. Catherine had dozed fitfully on the small sofa nearby, waking every few minutes to check on both her husband and the Queen. Dr. Mitchell had warned them during the early hours that the time was drawing near. The Queen's breathing had become more labored, and her periods of consciousness were growing shorter. The family had gathered in the adjoining sitting room, speaking in hushed tones and taking turns spending quiet moments at her bedside. William felt the crushing weight of impending loss, mixed with an unexpected sense of privilege. How many people in the world would ever have the opportunity to be present during such a profound moment? To witness the peaceful transition of someone who had dedicated their entire life to serving others? The honor was almost too great to bear. Catherine moved quietly to the bedside and took the Queen's hand. Even in her weakened state, Elizabeth managed to squeeze back, a small gesture that conveyed volumes about her awareness and love for her family. Her eyes opened slowly, focusing on Catherine with the same warmth and acceptance that had characterized their relationship from the beginning. "My dear Catherine," the Queen whispered, her voice barely audible but filled with affection. "Take care of him for me. And remember, the crown may be heavy, but love makes it bearable." The words hit Catherine like a physical blow. In those simple sentences, the Queen was passing more than advice. She was transferring a sacred trust. The responsibility of supporting William through the challenges ahead, of helping him navigate the complexities of modern monarchy, and of maintaining the human heart of an institution that could easily become cold and remote. King Charles entered the room, his composure finally cracking as he saw his mother's condition. The man who had waited his entire life to become king now faced the reality that his ascension would come at the cost of losing the person he had looked up to for over 70 years. He knelt beside the bed and took his mother's other hand, completing a circle of connection that embodied decades of family bonds. "I'm proud of you, Charles," the Queen said, each word an effort but filled with conviction. "You're ready. The country needs your compassion and your vision." William watched this exchange between his father and grandmother, understanding that he was witnessing a transfer of power that went far beyond constitutional procedures. This was about love, trust, and the passing of wisdom from one generation to the next. Someday, he would have a similar conversation with his own son, and the thought both terrified and comforted him. The Queen's eyes moved to William, and despite her weakness, her gaze remained sharp and focused. "My darling boy," she said, using the pet name she had called him since childhood. "You were born for this moment, not just to be king, but to be the king this country needs. Trust yourself, trust Catherine, and remember that the greatest strength comes from admitting when you need help." William leaned closer, his tears falling freely now. The formal protocols that usually governed their interactions had been stripped away, leaving only the raw truth of a grandmother's love for her grandson. "I don't want to let you down," he whispered, voicing the fear that had haunted him since childhood. "Impossible," the Queen replied with surprising firmness. "You've already made me prouder than you could ever know. The way you've raised your children, supported your father, and loved your wife tells me everything I need to know about the man you've become." The room fell into a peaceful silence, broken only by the quiet sounds of breathing and the occasional whisper of fabric as family members shifted positions. Outside, the Scottish Highlands stretched endlessly under a sky that seemed to mirror the emotional gravity of the moment inside the castle walls. Princess Anne sat in the corner, her usually stoic demeanor softened by grief but maintaining the practical presence that had always been her contribution to the family dynamic. She had been her mother's closest confidant in many ways, sharing a no-nonsense approach to royal duty that had bonded them throughout the decades. As the hours passed, the Queen drifted in and out of consciousness, but each time she woke, her eyes sought out the faces of her family members. Dr. Mitchell moved quietly in and out of the room, checking vitals and adjusting comfort measures, but her medical training couldn't hide the emotional impact of watching such a remarkable woman prepare for her final journey. Catherine found herself thinking about her own children, who were too young to fully understand what was happening, but old enough to sense the gravity of the situation. George, Charlotte, and Louis had developed their own special relationship with their great-grandmother, who had somehow found the energy to be genuinely interested in their schoolwork, their hobbies, and their dreams for the future. The Queen had insisted on recording video messages for each of her great-grandchildren, understanding that they would need something to remember her by as they grew older. These recordings, made during her final weeks, contained not royal proclamations, but personal messages filled with love, encouragement, and the kind of wisdom that only came from a lifetime of experience. William remembered the conversation they had shared just days earlier when the Queen had talked about legacy. "It's not about the buildings or the ceremonies," she had said. "It's about the love you leave behind and the example you set for those who come after you." As the afternoon light began to fade, the Queen's breathing became more peaceful, but noticeably weaker. The family gathered closer, forming a protective circle around the woman who had been their anchor for so many years. No words were needed. Their presence said everything about their love and respect. Catherine held William's hand as they both maintained their vigil. She could feel the tremor in his fingers, the barely controlled emotion that threatened to overwhelm him at any moment. But she also sensed his growing strength, the gradual acceptance of what was to come, and his readiness to carry forward the responsibilities that would soon be his. The Queen opened her eyes one final time, her gaze moving slowly around the room to take in each beloved face. Her lips moved slightly, forming words that only those closest could hear. "Thank you for loving me so well." As the sun set over the Scottish Highlands, Elizabeth peacefully let go, surrounded by the family she had served and loved throughout her remarkable life. The room filled with a profound silence that seemed to acknowledge the end of an era and the beginning of another. William and Catherine sat together in that sacred silence, their tears flowing freely, but their hearts filled with gratitude for having been part of something so beautiful and meaningful. They knew that tomorrow would bring ceremonies, protocols, and the weight of new responsibilities. But in that moment, they were simply family members who had been privileged to witness the graceful conclusion of a life lived in extraordinary service to others. The door that had seemed so daunting to open had led them to the greatest gift imaginable, the opportunity to say goodbye with love, to receive final blessings and wisdom, and to understand that death, when approached with grace and surrounded by love, could be as beautiful as life itself.